A warm welcome to our session today, a call to action for SAP S/4HANA customers regarding compatibility packs. I have the honor of having my colleagues, Michael Deller, Senior Director, Solution Management for SAP S/4HANA Cloud. Michael is a member of SAP S/4HANA Solution Management since 2014. Michael helped design and roll out the commercial models of SAP S/4HANA Cloud and on-premise. And together with Michael, we have Roland Hamm, Product Manager, SAP S/4HANA Private Cloud. Roland has 30 years SAP experience. He defines and drives development projects and guidelines to simplify customer system transition to S/4HANA. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Michael. Michael, over to you.
Good morning, dear participants. Thank you, Tanya, for having us and setting the stage. It's an interesting topic that we have this morning, compatibility packs. I would never have dreamed in 2015 when we created these animals that they would keep us busy for so long, but they've been getting attention recently, and that is good. Because there is a magic date, end of 2025, and it's not long to go. And that's why we intend to step up the communication from the SAP side about what compatibility packs are. So that's what we are going to start with. I'm going to cover the first section, but rather quickly, because the content of the first 6 or 7 slides has existed like that, more or less unchanged for years now. I will be a little bit more explicit about the second bullet point that you're seeing. There are differences between SAP S/4HANA Private Cloud and on-premise when it comes to compatibility packs. And this is also going to become more transparent to you in the course of the release of 2023, because we are going to split, for example, the feature scope description, which is where you can see the respective compatibility scopes. Then Roland will take over to cover the question, what tools and what information resources does SAP provide to you to help understand which compatibility packs am I concerned by. And finally, we'll take a look at 3 examples of compatibility packs. It's a collection of items which, if you're looking across the list, are really very, very different from case to case. So just to highlight that with 3 examples. That's the plan. Feel free to ask questions in the YouTube chat. The one of us who is not presenting is watching the chat and will react accordingly if it makes sense. So very quickly, what is a compatibility pack and what were our thoughts? What were our goals in 2015 when we created these things in order to achieve these goals? So I really love this slide because it explains really in a nutshell our thoughts around the transition from ERP to S/4HANA and what we did and the options that we had. So this left-hand side, as you can gather, represents the classic world, the business suite with ECC in the box below and what we used to call the new dimension product, CRM, SRM, and SCM in the boxes above. And we had to take decisions. Where do we take these solutions in the new world? Where do they go? And there were various paths that we decided on. For some solutions, we decided that the respective functionality would move to the cloud. Think of Ariba, think of our CX solutions, think of IBP, that kind of stuff. Then there were other functionalities where we said we are going to embed them into the S4 stack, which is one single consolidated software stack as opposed to the past. Think of PPDS, think of the service functionality from CRM, etc. Then there were a lot of functionalities where we said, okay, this is great what we are having here in ECC. We're just going to keep it. We are going to make full use of the HANA platform properties, reap all the benefits of the in-memory database. Think of what we used to call simple finance, the ArcDoc or whatever, tables, etc., etc. And now I need to click twice because I would like to first mention number 5. There were things that we intentionally left behind because we had redundant functionalities, multiple questionnaire tools, etc., and you just need one. So some of these things had to go, and Roland will talk about simplification items later. Now we are zooming in on number 4, and this is our topic today, compatibility packs. Now, let's rev up the time engine, to the time machine. Think back to 2015. Real S/4HANA, let's say, was still lacking functionality at the time. And we still had to take a couple of decisions what the new processes and solutions should look like. And our goal as SAP was and is, as always, to leave no customer behind and make sure that we are able to deliver disruptively new things, new technologies, make them available for your business. And at the same time, make sure that our customers can adopt them in an as non-disruptive manner as possible. So that's why we said, okay, there are a couple of these yellow dots here in ERP where we know this is really old stuff. And we really have to create something new. But this is going to take time, you know. Sometimes you have to discuss for weeks and months, sometimes even years, what the new world and the new architecture that is going to take you over the next 5 to 10 years going to look like. And so we said, okay, how do we buy this time? To put it in plain language. And we said, okay, let's do the following. And this is the first in SAP history. There is some functionality which we decided to keep in S/4HANA with a timestamp saying, okay, dear SAP customers, this is a functionality which we don't want to have in the perpetual scope of S4. But interim-wise, for a limited amount of time, we are going to keep it there, but be aware while we discuss and together decide what it's going to look like and create the new solutions. At some point in time, we are going to take out this old functionality, and this point in time is coming. So that was the idea, make the transition easier for customers using the business suite, make the transition to S/4HANA easier, and give ourselves sufficient time for redesigning the processes. And at the same time, we had to make sure that the commercial worlds of ERP and S/4HANA remain separated. That is a really important aspect, a legal aspect, which I'm not going to go deeper into, but that separation is really, really crucial for us. So therefore, we also had to make sure that classic solutions are not allowed and not able to run on an S/4HANA instance. So as you're seeing in the below picture, these scenarios are legally not allowed unless we explicitly say so. And we did in the shape of the compatibility packs for both solutions that require an extra license as well as core functionalities. So these temporary animals, in legal language, timely restricted use rights, term licenses for specified functionalities, these are the compatibility packs. They didn't come with an extra cost, but we said, basically what you need to have is a proper licensing of S/4HANA Enterprise Management plus the proper licensing for the solution in the past, meaning in ECC or in the business suite world, and that gives you the use right. Initially, we said these things will live until 2020. We extended them until the end of 2025. We even extended a subset, which you're seeing in the footnote, until the end of 2030. So if anybody tells you, oh, come on, SAP is going to extend that again, read my lips, we won't. We have a board decision saying the end of 2025 is there and it will stay there. And now is the time to make sure that everybody who's using it is aware and starting the corresponding measures to move to the recommended go-to solutions. Right, what helps you there is, first of all, the compatibility scope matrix. It's release independent, it's static, we don't add anything to it. It has a structure, section 1 or part 1, which you can see here on the slide, refers to all S/4HANA releases. Part 2 only refers to the releases 1503 and 1605, and I do hope that all of you are off these releases by now. And part 4 refers to core functionality. While part 1, I didn't mention that, refers to, as you can probably gather from the list here, extra licensed functionalities. We are coming to the difference between on-premise and SAP Private Cloud. And with that, we are moving on to a second aspect. Compatibility packs only apply to the S/4HANA world, and they only apply to S/4HANA instances. Meaning, if I have a customer case where the customer is running 2 productive instances, one for HCM separated from the other system which runs anything else, and the customer converts his anything else system to S/4HANA, this system will obey the S/4HANA commercial and maintenance rules, while the technically unchanged HCM system still is, as you can see, yellow, meaning following ECC or business suite rules. The picture looks, of course, different when you have a single instance with everything on it. In that case, when you do a conversion, anything on this S4 system, if we are talking about compatibility pack, obeys these respective rules. And we aim to replace these classic solutions with the release 2023. That was one of the statements that we gave. Release 2023 will have at least a first version for all compatibility packs where we do provide one. We don't have to, but don't worry, there's only one where we are saying we will not provide a successor. So with release 2023, we will provide at least a first version of the recommended go-to solutions. Now, what is the difference to compatibility packs in S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition? As you can see, and as you saw from the timeline, CPs, compatibility packs, are animals from the on-premise world 8 years ago. And therefore, as you saw in the definition, the prerequisite for having this temporary use right is a perpetual license, as we only have it in on-premise, which you cannot apply as a principle to a cloud contract. Imagine a new customer coming to us, signing the cloud subscription, and we telling him, but by the way, if you want to use this compatibility pack, you also need to sign an on-prem license. Doesn't make any sense at all. So what we did was we also defined these compatibility pack type use rights in S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition in the service description guide, which is the equivalent to the software use rights document in on-premise. But there is no, let's say, perpetual license prerequisite for them. They are just, if you want, built into the subscription. There have been a couple of exceptions, like travel management and HCM. We are going to look at those in detail at the end in the examples section. And if you look at the compatibility packs in private cloud, you will also see that the list is definitely shorter. Why? Because the compatibility packs in the private cloud only came in at a very, very late point in time compared to on-premise, when we already had a significant number of final go-to solutions in place. So we didn't need those interims at all, because the final solution was already there, as you can see from these 2 examples here on the slide. Okay, and with that, I'm actually stopping my screen share and handing over the microphone to Roland.
Thanks, Michael, for this great introduction. So just give me a second actually for sharing my screen. And I will then actually talk about about the tools which you can use to detect whether you are using compatibility scope in your system, and also where you find where do you get more details about the compatibility scope and the information about successors and how to actually migrate to the successors. So, as Michael has already said, the central information source for this documentation is on one hand the feature scope description. This is explicitly mentioned also in the central node. This node 2269.324 compatibility scope matrix for SAP S/4HANA on-premise is if you want also, let's say, a legal binding information you can provide. And in the node itself, there is some explanatory text. There's also the link to the feature scope description where you find the latest version always in the help portal. And very important, as you can see here on that slide, are the attachments to that SAP node. There are a couple of attachments. There are some which have an explanatory nature. That means there's an overview presentation, also explaining the whole concept of compatibility scope items and actually how you can find this. There's an FAQ document covering the most common question we usually receive when it comes actually to compatibility scope and managing it. And there are two important documents, the so-called SAP S/4HANA compatibility scope matrix. This is what Michael was already explaining. This is this PDF document which lists all of the included license and functionality which belong to the compatibility scope, and also they're linked to related simplification items. And to that link I come in a minute. The second very important document is actually the so-called way forward Excel. This contains information and links to alternate solutions which are going to replace the compatibility scope solution. That means these are the genuine S/4HANA applications and features and functions which will help you actually to migrate your business processes to, and then continue actually using those features which are required by your business. So seeing this here is one thing, and I will show you also the same fact in the in the dedicated documents. So just give me a second. I'm switching to the node first of all. So you see here the compatibility scope matrix as such, as I mentioned it has some explanatory text. Also very important is, and we receive a lot of questions about the fact what will happen after the end of the usage rights, which appear in end of 2025 or respectively end of 2030. So there's an SAP block here. I come to this also a little bit later. And as mentioned, by the fact that this document is referenced by a lot of other nodes, you see here all those attachments which are very important, which contain the legally binding information. So as you can see here, there's a compatibility scope matrix in detail, the PDF, and also the Excel document. And in order to find this, let's have a look on the compatibility scope matrix as such. As mentioned, this is a document which you can find in the on the help portal page. So if you would go here to our help portal, I need actually to move this a little bit in order to be able to utilize my screen best. Sorry for this. As you can see here on the help portal page, you've always found the feature scope description. As Michael was already mentioning, there's a feature scope description now in the upcoming release 2023, which will be a dedicated one for the S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. Going to this document, if we would click here, you would end up in that feature scope description document. It's a PDF, and in this document you can see the features which you will receive actually with the standard S/4HANA Enterprise Management License, followed by the feature descriptions of those features you would receive when you purchase enhanced LOB functions, and then followed by the industry-specific LOB functions. And the end of the document here, you see a detailed description about those features which actually are contained in the so-called S/4HANA compatibility packs. As you can see here, they are also ordered by the different functions and applications S/4HANA, ordered by alphabetical order, finance, human capital management, manufacturing, you name it. And if you go to a particular area, for instance, production planning, you see functionality which are listed in here. These are actually the functionalities which are comprised in the compatibility scope. So this is the feature scope description. As mentioned, another document which is pretty important is the way forward Excel. As you see, as the name is telling you, it's an Excel. And as you can see here, also here we have the same item IDs. The section 1, which is actually dealing with the licenses, and then the section 4, which is dealing really with the ERP functionality as such. You can see actually that we have the same numbering, we have the same naming of the titles. And the important thing is you see the status of availability of the different alternative solutions. If there is an alternative only planned and will be available actually on roadmap, or if the alternative already exists, and you can see here, for instance, in the HR area, as an example, for instance, here, let's take then as an example the HR recruiting one, where you see the alternative already exists, and there are differences in the alternative which exists for the S/4HANA on-premise. You see this in the column D and E, and for private cloud in the column F and G. So you see for on-premise, there you can actually go to the strategic solution SAP SuccessFactors, but also SAP Human Capital Management for SAP S/4HANA is available. Whereas actually for private cloud customers, the only alternative which exists is actually the SuccessFactors part. There are more columns which explain then actually in the status of the solution. So there are comments. You see links to the alternative solution here in this case for the human capital management S/4HANA. You see the related simplification items and also other information which are important, like informations to the where you can find roadmap information for those solutions which are not where they are compatible alternative not yet exist, but is in planning or in a certain stage. And you find also information about business impact information, and also links to the help portal and the feature scope description. So let's look back to that to the PowerPoint part. So this is a short introduction about the different information sources you have here, and let's look a little bit again on the compatibility scope item. And you can see, as mentioned here, especially in the part 4, where we have the details on the ERP package we ship, there are different things to watch out. So one thing is here in the yellow mark one. Let's look on the item 454. Process instruction sheet, you see a footnote, the number 4 here, which indicates that some special items, we have actually extended the use right until end of 2030, sorry. This is the case for some areas where we have realized, now we have discussed a lot with our SAP user groups about the difficulties of our customers actually in migrating their business in time right before the user's rights ends. And so we have some areas like actually PPS and customer service and transportation management, where we have extended the use rights for this one. So please take care. There are only some items which have this footnote, and for those items, actually the use rights are a little bit longer. Again, you should see also some other information. If you look here again for the yellow marks thing, you see the component. That means the description of the package. The subcomponents, which is typically also a component from our documentation or from opening any tickets or looking for SAP notes, a detailed description, the application component hierarchy in here, and very important, a link to a so-called simplification item and the related business impact note. This is important, and I will explain this relationship in a minute. Important to understand is there's always a relationship between a compatibility scope item and a simplification item. Sometimes it could happen that some compatibility scope items are described with one simplification item or vice versa. In most of the cases, there's a one-to-one relationship in between. However, there's always a relationship. And last comment I want to make is sometimes you would see here, you see also deleted part. This is actually why we have decided actually to renovate compatibility scope in a way that it fulfills S/4HANA standards. So we keep some functionality for as they use for the customer. They are not strategic, but they will continue to be available, and they have been deleted here from the history over the different releases. So having that said, let's switch to the simplifications. So simplifications is actually our concept, which we have introduced when we developed S4HANA. S4HANA as a new generation of ERP was actually we did a completely redesign of all our application functionality, the business processes, due to the underlying potential of the S4HANA of the HANA database, in-memory database, so to facilitate this to an end, and also modernize our to some parts actually 30 years old architecture of classical ERP to S4HANA. We have renovated our business functions and applications and the technical presentation of this as well. So as a matter of fact, we did a lot of incompatible changes in between the classical SAP ERP 6.0 application and S4HANA and the different releases. And to help you migrate, in between from ERP to SAP S4HANA, we introduced the concept of a simplification item. A simplification item documents the differences in the application functionality, whether it has been changed, replaced, or removed between the version 6.0 of SAP ERP and SAP S4HANA, but also as well as in between different versions of S4HANA. So once you are in S4HANA and you migrate and you do an upgrade from an older version of SAP S4HANA to a newer version, also here it could happen that we have renovated some functions in between and there are incompatible changes. And to help you to find out that there are those incompatible changes and find also out what kind of measures you have to take, the simplification item provides information about the potential impact of this change for you as a customer. And a collection of those items which we ship per release is called a simplification list. So this simplification list provides the information per S4HANA release as part of the standard SAP S4HANA documentation. You would also find this on the help portal page of the respective S4HANA release, no matter if it's on-premise or private cloud edition. And this is not, let's say, the readable part. So we have this actually, this information included in SAP notes, which we call business impact notes, but there's also a technical component of the simplification item, machine readable information. And this machine readable information is used by the SAP readiness check tool for SAP S4HANA, the other custom code analysis and the simplification item checks. These are based on those information and simplification items, and they can help you detect actually the usage of those or the potential uses of compatibility scope in SAP S4HANA if you do a migration from ERP to S4HANA, for instance, with a system conversion, or if you do an upgrade, it can still find out if you are using or would use compatibility scope functionality in your targeted S4HANA system. Even more, in case dedicated simplification items require mandatory preparation steps before you do a conversion or a technical upgrade procedure, we can detect this and can help you actually find this out. And so the technical conversion or the upgrade can stop and help ensure that you actually do a consistent technical conversion. As mentioned, the information in the simplification list is accessible in two ways. There is an online access to in the so-called simplification item catalog, which you find on a SAP for Me page, and then you find here also the direct URL. On that one, you find the simplification item catalog. You can scan for the different target releases you may are interested in, and then you get a list of those simplification items. You have different possibilities to set filters about a particular functionality or business areas, about releases, categories, and so on and so forth, and find this information and the related business impact notes. And in addition to this, of course, we offer this information as a simplification as a PDF document. The full list of those simplification items per release, and you find this on the SAP help portal. Important to understand this, for instance, for the release SAP S4HANA 22, there are meanwhile roughly a little bit more than 750 simplification items. That means incompatible changes we have documented. But for a given customer system, depending on your customization and the use of business processes, mix of application, approximately only 50 or 90 of those simplification items are typically relevant and require your attention. That means you will be affected by a system conversion to the target release or by an upgrade to the target release, and you have to take care about these ones. How this works is nicely described in an SAP blog, SAP S4HANA simplification item check, how to do it right. And this brings me to the tool which you would use in order to detect which kind of compatibility scope you're using. So important to understand is compatibility scope items have a relationship to simplification items. So by their nature, there are, let's say, a special category of simplification items. So also, let's say, changes to functionality, which has an impact. And in the sub-readiness check, you see nicely here, we have tiles which explain the standard simplification item, changes to existing functionality in SAP S/4HANA, and changing to functionality which we still deliver. So compatible scope items which you can still use. And you see here actually for the targeted release, which of the functionality you are using in your system on your source release. And if you would do the system conversion or the update, would then actually also appear in your system on the target release and require your attention. Not necessary now. You can decide whether you want to take care about, let's say, migrating to a successor functionality as part of that upgrade or part of the system conversion, or you will do this later in a separate, let's say, project. However, you need actually to notify that there are these items then still in your system, require attention, and that the use rights end by end of 2025. So as you can see here, we can detect the potential usage of compatibility scope in an S/4HANA system by the current usage of the functionalities in your system on the source release. Even let's say an upgrade or a system conversion, the technical tool, the SUM, will run the simplification item check and will also point you to this one. So that gives you actually the scope of the things you have to take care about. And just again for completing this information, as said, let's say the relationship between a simplification item and a compatibility scope item is a compatibility scope item is, so if you so-called a simplification item of special type, the special type is simplification of a type non-strategic. As you can see, there could be the different, let's say, options of a non-strategic function. If an alternative already exists, remember the Excel I have just shown you, where you can see if an alternative already exists, the alternative exists with a roadmap. An alternative is only planned, or let's say those areas where we say we are going to deprecate this functionality. There are also some rare items where we do not have an alternative planned due to actually long tail, and we see that customers will not use this anymore. So this gives you the relationship. And as said, in the way forward Excel, you see also again the different status information, like as I mentioned, the alternative exists with roadmap, and so on and so forth. You see the different packages, you see their status, and then remember, the status could be different if it's on-premise or if it's private cloud edition. You have information about the successor solution, the related simplification item, the link to a feature scope description, and also link actually to more information like the Roadmap Explorer and the product documentation in the help portal. So let's talk a little bit about the way forward. So how would you get actually a safe ride in migrating from ERP to SAP S/4HANA, or doing an upgrade project on SAP S/4HANA if you're already on and you have to deal with the compatibility scope? So let's look a little bit on the timelines first. When we look first actually on the ERP side of the house, you see ERP is a maintenance topic, and there are different releases. So as you can see here, SAP ERP 6.0 in the lower enhancement package, the mainstream maintenance will end by end of 2025, and then actually this product will go into customer-specific maintenance. For the business suite, with the last three enhancement packages, 6, 7, and 8, you see the mainstream maintenance goes until end of 2027. So please notify there is this important difference in between. Also, if you especially if you intend actually to use your ERP system longer, then please understand the difference between the different enhancement package levels. This maintenance, as mentioned, ends definitely by end of 2027, and you have the option to optionally purchase extended maintenance, which then will go into end of 2030, or you run, or you directly would go into customer-specific maintenance. When we now actually try to map this information on the use right topics, that means on the compatibility packs, you see S4HANA compatibility text, that means the use right to use classical ERP functionality in S4HANA system, ends by end of 2025. Only some selected compatibility scope items, and you see here the footnote here, and I list this in a second, they will have use rights extension until end of 2030. However, the classical license, that means the S4HANA product as such use rights, will last on, and we have made a maintenance commitment for SAP S4HANA that the mainstream maintenance for SAP S4HANA will go at least until end of 2040. So what does it really mean actually when you now actually plan to migrate to SAP S4HANA or you're on S4HANA? So we've seen there are some compatibility scope items where an alternative solution is already available in S4HANA with a compatibility scope, and you can actually either migrate directly to that functionality while you do a system conversion, or let's say also your migration to a SAP S4HANA, or if you're already on S4HANA, you can immediately also do a migration project for this one. There are other compatibility scope items which have a roadmap, so they will be in a certain state, and then you will see until they have reached actually a compatibility item, which is anytime maybe between now and let's say the 2023 release, and now we are pretty close to this one, and latest actually with the release 2023, we have all alternative solutions available in that release. So as you can see, the idea is actually, or the advice is that you clean up the compatibility items as they are available, either as part of your migration from ERP to SAP S4HANA, or in a separate project, or as part of an upgrade project between different S4HANA releases. However, watch these timelines here. Use rights end of 2025. Also important to understand here, again, there are probably a lot of questions actually, what will happen after 2025, respectively 2030 with a compatibility scope, which are in the system and which I haven't potentially migrated yet. So we come to this a little bit later. Important again, if you look on that page here, as mentioned, actually the compatibility scope item successor functionality will be available at least 2023. This is explicitly mentioned here on that slide again. So with the upcoming 2023 release, which we plan to ship in mid of October, so basically in 2.5 weeks, we have now, until this point of time, we have now delivered a couple of S4HANA releases where we had the possibility also actually to take care about having a genuine S4HANA successor of compatibility scope, which we shipped in those products. And with this release, we're delivering a completeness of all compatibility scope alternatives in that release. And with this release, also it's important. It's not only for this one, the go-to release, but also for the fact that we change our release strategy with the release 2023. Because from this onwards on, actually, we switch from a yearly major release availability to shipping a major S4HANA release every 2 years. In between those 2 years, we will ship now in a half-yearly 3 feature packs with functional roundups and some dedicated innovations, followed by a 5-year mainstream maintenance with half-yearly support packages, which gives you an overall mainstream maintenance of each S4HANA release starting with 2023 of 7 years. Okay, so with this, I've concluded my part in showing you where you find more information, which will help you identify if you're using compatibility scope in a release, and actually the timelines you have to watch and their relationship. Important to mention here is if you do a migration from ERP to SAP S4HANA, it's not only the system conversion, which would actually bring you to a situation that actually you continue to use functionality, which is then considered to be compatibility scope in your S4HANA system. Even if you do a new implementation, that means a greenfield implementation, there could be that you intentionally or unintentionally implement features in SAP S4HANA which are considered to be compatibility scope. Maybe for the sake that a successor is not yet available in full scope, but even actually unintentionally. So that means a greenfield if you have done a greenfield implementation, plan to do a greenfield implementation, it's also very important that you use this readiness check to identify and make aware and make clear actually if and where you are using compatible scope functionality, because this requires further action until the end of the use rights appear. With that, I hand over back to Michael.
Okay, thank you, Roland. You really stepped on the gas. Let me.
That gives us more time actually to discuss any questions, and let's.
Exactly. I've just been answering one question in the chat, and with that, let me also share my screen again. So, dear participants, lots of details, some of which you, I hope, already knew because they've been around for quite a while. But more details to come now. And if you don't get your head around, let's say, details, especially in the relationship between releases and compatibility packs in the first run, don't worry about it. It's yeah, not always self-explanatory. Hello? Can you hear me?
Now again, yes, it was interrupted, your
Okay.
microphone.
Yeah, my PC is doing something which it probably shouldn't. I'm seeing the wheel of death. Maybe we wait for it to calm down. Roland, could you probably, I changed the sequence of the slides. Roland, would it be possible that you explain the first example, the project system and its future path, the call and come back immediately?
Roland, you're on mute.
Yeah, I have just realized that I'm mute. So okay, I will then actually take over again screen sharing. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
And so let's have a look into the zoo of compatible scope items. And here we have the first one. So as an example, we have the project system. These are actually described in the compatible scope IDs 459 to 472. There's a solution strategy that most of those compatible scope items functionalities will be transferred to a perpetual scope with a release 2023. Again, here, remember, this is our go-to release, but some functions remain as compatible scope and they will expire. So here it's very important that you look in the way forward Excel to see for the particular compatible scope items actually about their nature, which of the functionality it has been moved into perpetual scope, which you can continue to use, and which are not, and which are which are the options to for alternate solutions. Michael, do you want to comment on this? I'm not too familiar with this one, so
okay, but thanks.
That I move the screen for you, and you take the voice.
Okay, super. Thank you, Roland, for bridging the gap here. Sorry for the technical inconvenience. So we are now coming to 3 examples of compatibility packs and what their future is going to look like. And as you can see already from these 3 examples, the individual items in the CP matrix are very, very different with regards to what we are doing about them and what the requirements are also from a customer end. So project system is a good example because when you open the section 4 of the compatibility matrix, you will see lots of entries for PS, and we have lots of customers using PS. So doing something disruptively here in the sense of changing data structures, et cetera, would not have been a good idea. And therefore, the overall solution strategy here is to be as non-disruptive in the renovation of the project system for S/4HANA as possible, meaning we will leave most of the CP items that you find on the list, meaning most of the project system as they are. Also meaning you don't need to do a data migration or reformatting or something to be future-proof for the project system. There are a couple of functionalities which we will need to deprecate, which we will need to get rid of at the end of 2025. All of these functionalities are well documented in the notes, and Roland has shown you how to access that information through the metrics and the way forward Excel. Yeah, there are things, technical things like the end of maintenance for Java components in the front end, etc. So these are obviously cases where we have to do something and come up with a successor. But other than that, yeah, it will be more or less as you know it from the past. Enhanced in some areas like accessing new finance data structures. So you can read all of that through the notes, and for the project system as well as for the next two examples, I've also added the licensing aspect of it. So the PS functionality in on-premise included in functional use, and its equivalent in the private cloud, and tailored option in the core use, which goes into the FUE calculation. With that, let's move on to the second example. Classic travel and expense. Similar to HCM, the solution strategy here is cloud first. So any customer should move to Concur because FITV is not strategic anymore, and we are not investing into this functionality anymore. The situation here has been that we had the compatibility pack use right in on-premise, and so far we excluded it explicitly in our cloud contracts. There was an explicit clause in the service description guide saying FITV is not part of your cloud contract, because we said a cloud-minded customer should go to Concur immediately. Now, big surprise, there are customer cases where the scope of Concur doesn't quite fit. And therefore, we decided to make classic travel and expense part of the perpetual scope, both in on-premise and in private cloud. You could also say we are bringing it back to private cloud in order to cover customers who are not able to immediately switch to Concur. You're seeing the respective licensing vehicles here in on-premise through productivity use. There was a change in the software use rights, and we also created a respective licensing material for the Cloud Private Edition. Please be aware that this, let's say the Concur people do take a look at your situation, at the customer situation, in order to find out if a faster path towards Concur is possible. Tailored option will also follow. Next slide, please. And here comes the next and probably last thing to wrap your head around. The question is really, when is a customer compliant, and is there a dependency on the technical release? Because on the previous slide, I've been talking about commercial things. And the answer is, yes, there is. Because if you look at what's in the respective releases, technically speaking, up to release 2022 of S/4HANA, what you have in there is the compatibility pack, which is something for which there isn't and there cannot be a perpetual use right. Only as of release 2022, we have the S4 adapted version of FITV, which has the S4 product qualities, and therefore customers are 2026 proof only with the release 2022 or later. Right? And therefore our recommendation for customers who use FITV is, if you want to be compatibility pack compliant, and we definitely recommend to do everything you can, because not being compatibility pack compliant means being in licensing non-compliance. You should be, customers using FITV should be on release 2022 at least. Why not go to 23 immediately? Because for various reasons, that is a milestone release, as Roland has already explained. Same game, next slide, please, for HCM. The situation here is a little different when you look at the on-prem and PCE situation in parallel. So for on-premise, we, until release 2022, had the compatibility pack as use rights or the licensing version, the licensing option. With release 2022, we brought in the new HCM license materials, which you can see on that slide here. And the interesting thing is that with this step in on-premise on release 2022, we actually followed what we did 2 years earlier or 3 years earlier in private cloud, because in private cloud, HCM was always excluded. Why was it excluded from compatibility scope? Because from the very start, we had HCM licenses in place. And you're seeing this overview here about the respective license materials in on-premise, private cloud, and tailored option. So that's where we are today for HCM. Again, strategic solution is SuccessFactors. That was a bit too fast.
Yeah.
Strategic solution is SuccessFactors. That's where customers should go. Nevertheless, HCM is part of the perpetual scope, but licensing-wise, and that is the same that applies to FITV, which you saw on the previous example, we decided not to look backward. We are getting many questions from our customers. Hey, HCM functionality, some of it, and FITV used to be part of the core user licenses. And then we say, yes, that's right. That's how it was in the past. But the right thing to do now is to look forward, because customers will move to SuccessFactors. They do so. Customers will move to Concur. And it's the right thing to now look at a cloud age and appropriate and a modern licensing model. And that means a business metric. Because putting something into a core license now, again, as it was in the past, and then having to somehow carve it out and compensate customers for that, that's not how to do it. Let's take this step now. And move these solutions to a licensing model that is future-proof. Next slide, please. So same question, same game here. With which release is a customer really 2026 compliant? Same as with FITV. And now, Tammy, we are coming to your question that I've seen in the chat. It's a little easier in HCM because there is a switch for HCM. So the short answer is customers who have activated what we internally call S4H4, they are licensing-wise compliant because they are no longer using the compatibility pack. And what they're using is covered by the perpetual scope. Compatibility pack never is. Same recommendation as in the previous example. By any means, try to get to release 2023 for HCM and FITV. Release 2022 already does the trick for some other compatibility packs, which we will bring to perpetual scope in the next 2 years. That might even be a later release. Okay, next slide, please. We already had some discussions in the chat function, Q&A function of the teaser block, which we created in August. And I would like to encourage you, if you think of something, if a question pops up, it would be great if you could raise that question in this particular block. If you look into it, we already had a discussion end of August, a great discussion about the MRP lists with an opinion saying, do we still need them? And an opinion from a BTS colleague, Business Transformation Services, saying, yeah, we had that discussion in various customer situations. And after customers really got their head around how to work in a real-time system again, we are bringing you back to real-time with S4HANA. You don't really need such things as long lists, which you probably even print out and go through. You will work differently in S4HANA than in ECC. And having the questions obviously in the block has the advantage that this kind of scales. Roland and I cannot talk to thousands of customers. So as you've probably seen throughout our presentation, We've done our best to set up mechanisms and tools and information assets that scale, which you can use to find the correct path forward for the situation you or your customer is in. Next slide, please. Yeah, there are more blogs, one by Anja and Jan about compatibility scope and what happens after 2025, respectively 2030. And with that, I think we are pretty much at the end of our slides. I think there's one more showing the declaration of the extension of the footnote candidates until 2030, but we won't go into detail about those. And with that, I think we can actually take a look at what is in the Q&A. Roland, would you by chance have the Q&A window open?
Just give me a second. Yep, I will do so.
I have one, which I can read out now. In the end of the presentation, it would be nice to get shown the real-life process of determining relevant CPs for a certain customer, where to start, how to find the fields. Not sure we have the time, but I think
it's a valid question. Maybe we could do a follow-up or something and going into details about this, running the checks, interpreting the results. That's definitely a good idea. And thank you for that proposal, but we only have 4 minutes left now. I think that is not fitting today.
So the question here is from Alessandro. What does perpetual scope mean for compatibility scope matrix item? I'm talking about item 401 and OS in a particular OSS node.
Yeah, I did answer that in the chat. So we are talking about non-ferrous metals. This is being moved to perpetual scope, meaning functionality will be available really undisruptively, the same as you know it in S/4HANA beyond 2026. We don't really mess with the coding and change with the and change data structures or processes. There was one more up about SRM. So can you scroll up, Roland?
Yeah.
Javier. So Javier, you're really mixing several topics here. Point one, SRM is not a compatibility pack. You won't find it anywhere on the compatibility pack matrix, so these rules do not apply. Point two, you're talking about a separate instance. Remember the one slide which I had with the HCM example? If you have a separate classic instance, which you probably have with SRM, then compatibility pack rights and this expiry do not apply because compatibility pack only exists in S/4HANA, not in the classic world. So that means for SRM, I'm not talking yet about the deployment model. For SRM, the yellow bars from Roland's timeline about the maintenance strategy apply, but the use rights are and remain perpetual for SRM per se. Third aspect, Javier, I love the question because it allows us to dissect it and look at the different angles. You're talking about a RISE context. This is where it gets interesting because in the RISE context, we are in a subscription model. And there are certain rules for including solutions into a subscription model, which are obviously not applying to on-prem or anywhere else, but in a cloud model, we, SAP, are suddenly the provider. We have to run this box for you consistently and at least over the course of your subscription period. And therefore, we have an internal rule at SAP, which is really a hard rule, which says we are only allowed to include solutions into a cloud contract which have at least 5 years of mainstream maintenance. And this is where it gets interesting because SRM doesn't. The mainstream maintenance for SRM ends in less than 5 years. and therefore it is not possible to include SRM into a RISE contract, besides the fact that RISE only applies to real S4 products and not to classic products. I'm afraid that's the answer. I'm aware that customers need, in some cases, more time to move certain functionalities to Ariba, but that is where we are.
We are now on top of the hour, unfortunately. There are still 2 questions open. It would be great if we could answer them afterwards and post the answers to the 2 questions from M. Vögeli in the comments area. I hope that is okay for you. And with this, I would really like to thank our experts for your exhausting presentation and answers to the questions. And of course, a heartfelt thank you for all attendees for joining. I hope you got a lot of value from this session. And with this, I wish everyone a great day, a great evening, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.